The Silk Road, an ancient trade route linking China with the West. Silk, spices, and porcelain travelled westward, and goods such as wool, gold, and silver headed east. Many empires of old used this network of paths for more than 1,500 years, exchanging not just goods, but also ideas between diverse cultures. Today, a new vision for a modern Silk Road is underway, the Belt and Road Initiative, spearheaded by China. It is an economic effort seeking to create a land and sea connection from Xi'an in the east to Istanbul in the west, achieved primarily through infrastructure projects along the network. President Xi Jinping convened the third Belt and Road Forum in Beijing this week, showcasing future plans for China's economic cooperation as the initiative enters its second decade.
China has become a main trading partner of more than 140 countries and regions and a primary source of investment for more countries. Both Chinese investment overseas and foreign investment in China have boosted friendship, cooperation, confidence, and hope.
According to China's white paper on the project, Beijing has signed more than 200 cooperation agreements with more than 150 countries. The World Bank estimates that by 2030, the initiative will generate $1.6 trillion in global revenue each year, accounting for 1.3% of global GDP.
The China Development Bank and the Export-Import Bank of China will set up a $47.9 billion financing window. An additional $10.9 billion will be injected into the Silk Road Fund. Together, they will support BRI projects on the basis of market and business operations.
But the initiative has faced several challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic causing delays in loan repayments, stalled projects due to regional conflicts, and poor project selection. Despite this, many world leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, attended the forum, reiterating their commitments to economic integration.
It's an agreement with Russian ideas to create an integration circuit where freedom of trade, investment, and labor would be fully ensured and an interconnected infrastructure would be established. It's also consonant with Russia's well-known proposal to form a large Eurasian partnership as a space of cooperation and interaction of like-minded people.
The total value of exports and imports between China and partner countries reached $19.1 trillion between 2013 and 2022. And China hopes that despite the challenges, the project will continue to flourish. Emre Boz, TRT World.
For more on this now, we are joined by Jacob Mardell in Berlin. He is the editorial coordinator for Network for Border Crossing Journalism. Thank you very much for joining us today. Right, can we start a brief outline of what the Belt and Road Initiative is? What results has it achieved since it was launched around 10 years ago now?
Thank you for having me. So technically, the Belt and Road consists of these two parts. There's the Silk Road Economic Belt, which Xi Jinping announced in Kazakhstan in 2013, which connects China with Europe through Central Asia. And then there's the Maritime Silk Road, announced in Indonesia a month later, which is China to Europe across the sea. However, there's not really an official definition of what the BRI is, in the sense that there isn't a list of BRI projects. There's no concrete blueprint or institutional structure, which is why I tend to say that it's mainly a marketing slogan. It's a narrative China's selling to the world. The element of the BRI that has garnered a lot of attention is the infrastructure building that China's done using finance from Chinese policy banks. And the impact of these projects varies enormously. As I said, it's not really a cohesive whole. You have to look at the projects case by case, but they have attracted some criticism because of their environmental impact. There's also concerns that some of these projects aren't very economically viable and that they saddle countries with unsustainable levels of debt.
Very interesting on those criticisms that you mentioned. And the meeting this week also comes at a very delicate time for the relations between China and the US and Europe as well. China's President Xi Jinping criticized Western attempts to reduce dependency on China, whereas Western leaders are saying essentially their countries need to diversify their supply chains. What's your view on that? Is the West too dependent on China? And if so, what can they do about it?
It's a complex issue. I think Europe as a whole is very dependent on China for certain materials, critical minerals. Then economies like Germany's are very dependent on China as a market for its products and services. So it depends where you look. And the issue of supply chain disruption was really brought home during the pandemic. There's an inherent insecurity in overly relying on one source for critical inputs, and that's regardless of where inputs are coming from. And then separately, there's the question of dependence on China, and this was an issue brought home by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Europe had been very complacent about its energy dependence on Russia. Then Russia invaded another European country, and suddenly EU countries found themselves in a tricky spot. And the fear is that similar thing might happen in the case of China perhaps invading Taiwan. Even without this scenario, China has a track record of unofficially weaponizing its economy, leveraging its market to protect its political interests. And many Europeans are worried about being stuck in a situation where, for example, they can't speak out about human rights concerns for fear of receiving an economic penalty.